All right, turn in your Bibles to Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12. As you're doing that, I'm going to give you a little background. I remember as a kid getting into a fight or two. Anyone else scrap a little bit here and there? Okay, Lorraine, raise your hand. I'm stuck. But mostly because I had a big mouth. Okay, and I was a trouble starter. Trouble, that's the correct way to say it. I started a lot of trouble. Troublemaker. Trouble starter, it doesn't sound right. But I talked a lot of trash, okay? I exaggerated and had a lot of people that would get frustrated with me. And there was these times when I would be doing that with the wrong person, and it started to get a little dicey and a little heated, and I started to feel a little threatened. And so when I thought that there was a fight about to happen, I kind of had this mode I'd switch into called the crazy mode. And I'd be like, man, you don't want to mess with me, man. I'm crazy. I'm crazy. And I'd be like trying to get them to like be afraid of me. Like, if we start fighting now, I don't know if I'm going to stop. Okay? But the reality was I was afraid. I was really afraid. And I don't know if you ever heard the statement, anger is fear in disguise. I mean, I was literally like trying to figure out how to get out of the situation. But what happened a lot of times is, even though I was a runt, I had a really big older brother. Okay? And he would a lot of times would swoop in when those situations happen and even sometimes beat up the person for me, okay? You get what I'm talking about? So when I caught wind to the fact that my brother would like bail me out, I got crazier. The people I would fight against got bigger, okay? I remember this one particular time I think we were after school, we had just got done with sports, and I was like, this scrawny little runt, and in a different sport, but there was these two football players that were like offensive linemen, okay? So you just picture in your brain the biggest, baddest, ugliest dude you can picture. That's who they were. And somehow, I'm here, and there's this little thing going on where I got to turn on the crazy side because they're ready to fight me. I don't know how I got in this situation. And I'm like, man, you don't want to mess with me, man. But I looked around, and I couldn't see my brother. And I'm like, man, if I get started, I'm going to tear you up. And I'm like talking, I'm walking, and I'm like, where is my brother? And I'm looking around, and they're like, you want to just eat this dude for lunch? You want to just kill him? And they were like looking at each other, and I was like, oh. I'm like, and then also my brother's head popped out. I said, hey, Bob, what's up, Pat? What are you guys doing? Oh, we about to beat up this little dude here. And I was like, still doing my stuff, and I was like, thankful for my brother. He goes, oh, that's my little brother, Poochie. I'm like, oh, you Jerry's brother. Oh, man, what's up, man? And I'm all like, yeah, you better be glad my brother showed up. yeah, that's right. Sweating and like ready to fall out, right? So the reason I can have such confidence normally is because my brother was in the background. I knew where my help would come from, okay? So we're going to read today, don't turn it now, we're going to read Psalms 121. And the theme of this, the writer basically is asking a question, from whence comes my help? We're going to talk about, do you see your need for help, and do you understand the type of help God can offer? But before we do that, let's look at Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12. I'm going to use this to give some context because it's important to realize that Psalms 121 is a part of a group of 15 psalms called the Songs of Ascent, or Ascend, depending on how you say it, where the Israelites were moving from either out of Babylon to the city of worship in Jerusalem, or some say in different places they were moving from one place and they were ascending up the mountain to worship. Okay, and I like this because it just made me think for a second. I just paused and thought, why would they have to sing these, Psalms 120 to 134, these 15 different psalms to get to the city of worship? Why did they have to do that? Because they had to be prepared for worship. Because we're not naturally ready to worship, okay? We're not naturally ready to say, have thine own way, Lord. That's not my natural thing. I have so many things in my life that I could do and be distracted by or even thrilled by. So these songs of ascent are a group of these songs that are preparing the congregation or nation of Israel for worship, which they were not ready for naturally. And so we're not any different. That's why we sing songs beforehand, whether we have the songbooks or not. That's why we pray beforehand. That's why we, at DBC, we do a long passage. We're trying to get ourselves in a posture to be ready to worship, to be ready to take in the Word of God and be ready to let it impact us. So that always begs the question, what is worship, right? What is it? And so that's why I have you turn to Romans chapter 12. Look at the first two verses in chapter 12. And it starts, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, it's talking to believers, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. Now, that actually is translated service or worship. This is your act of worship, as one passage New International Version. Verse 2, and do not be conformed to this world, or squeezed into his mold, as some would say, but be transformed, be metamorphosed by the renewing of your mind, the exchanging of your mindset, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So that's where God wants us to be. So if you define worship using Romans 12:1 and 2, worship occurs when we as individual believers offer ourselves or yield ourselves in service to the Lord. Worship occurs when we as individuals offer ourselves or yield ourselves in service to the Lord. This can happen right in your seat. Lord, I'm available. This can happen when you're watching Netflix. Lord, I'm yielded right now. I mean, it's not unusual that you might be in some place doing one thing and God says, as your servant, I want you to go here. You get a phone call, you get some news, you get something happens. He gives you a thought. But it occurs when we offer ourselves or yield ourselves in service to the Lord. And what I like to always preface is, there's nothing standing in the way of that. Why can we do that? Why can we offer ourselves? Well, what does the verse say? It says, because we are already holy and already acceptable. As a legalistic, as a recovering legalist, I've read that verse for years thinking I had to be holy. I had to be acceptable. That is my identity. You are holy and acceptable to God. Why? As we'll look at, because of the mercies of God. You are actually ready. You are actually set up to just interact with God right now. And what me and John were talking about this yesterday. There's no tricks. There's no techniques. Like, okay, Lord, if I get this duck in a row, if I get this, it's like, no, it's already been done because of the work of Christ. So you are already holy. You're already set apart. You're already acceptable in the beloved. This is your position, and this should drive your practice. This should drive the practice of those who do what? Receive God's mercy. Look at some of the results. Verse 2. There's potential metamorphosis or transformation. Potential metamorphosis or transformation. How is that done? By the renewing or exchanging. That word renew you can put in the word exchange. The exchange of your mindset, the exchange of your viewpoint. And then what else can be a result? Look at the rest of verse 2. Then we will know that good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. I always like to say, God wants to fill the gap. He wants to give you that good, acceptable, perfect will. Okay? And you're only going to do that if you just do the first part of it. It's not a legal thing where you go out and you make God's will good and acceptable and perfect. You just need to be looking at His mercy. And in view of His mercy, you need to be offered. I like what Habakkuk says, which is amazing, because we don't think this way, so I'm just going to keep saying this over and over again. I'm sorry, not Habakkuk, Micah. Micah 7:18. Listen to this. Micah 7:18. Who is a God like you, pardoning iniquity and passing over the transgression of the remnant of his heritage? I mean, he could have taken Israel at any time and would have been justified for it. They were a bunch of knuckleheads, right? I mean, he would do things for them and they would just say, oh, God, you gave us quail without barbecue sauce. I mean, they were just so picky. right? Just like us. I read Israel's story and I'm like, that's me. Except I don't, wear the little beanie, right? Okay, whatever. He goes on to say, he does not retain his anger forever because he delights in mercy. So in order for you and I to really have worship, that worship needs to be saturated or as a byproduct of us seeing his mercy. I mean, the worship should be mercy driven. So when we see, as he says in verse 1, I beseech you by the mercies, it's another way of saying in view of. When you look at God's mercies and what you don't get, what else is there left to do to say, Lord, I'm going to yield to you because I don't get what I deserve. And so we're basically able to see that mercy, and in that mercy we have a yieldedness based on the fact that we're holy and acceptable and we're already set up to worship. And that is only going to happen if we see our need for him. All right, so that's our setup for Psalms 121. Just to get us ready for some interaction here, who wants to read the first 4 verses and who wants to read the last 4 verses? There's only 8 verses in 121. Who wants to read 1 through 4? Psalms 121, 1 through 4.
I can when I get there.
Okay. I can go to the car. I have a candy bar if you want to read it. No, I'm just joking. That's what I do with the little kids. Who wants to memorize verses? I'll bribe you. Then I say the word is sweet. That's why I give candy, right? So you want to do which ones? 5 through 8 or 1 through 4? Did you want to read them or did I? Okay, I'm not volunteering you. If you want to. Did you want to do 1 through 4? You do 1 through 4? Okay, 1 through 4, 5 through 8. All right, go for it.
I will lift up my eyes to the mountains. From where shall my help come? My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to slip. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep.
The Lord is your keeper, the Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve you from all evil. He shall preserve your soul. The Lord shall preserve your going out and your coming in, from this time forth and even forevermore.
Very good. So remember, this is a song of ascent. This is the Israelites trying to be prepared for worship. So one of the things you will notice, and I've been saying that multiple times just to make the point, is we're not ready for worship. We're just not naturally like, okay, God, have that on way, right? I mean, am I the only person that feels that way? I mean, it's not our natural thing to wake up and say, God, you do your thing. And so you see right in verse 1, there's an action reflecting a human response or responsibility. My definition of responsibility is responsibility, responding to the abilities of another or responding with your abilities. I'm responding and I'm saying, I will lift my eyes. This is a choice. I will lift my eyes up. Okay, there's a direction. So you and I have to choose to look up. It's not natural for us to look up. Why? So when I look up, when I'm lifting, that's a choice, I'm looking. So there's this action of lifting and looking. So the psalmist says, I will lift my eyes up so I can naturally get away from myself and unnaturally look at where does my help come from? And why are we not ready to just naturally worship? I love this because there's hills. So whatever direction you travel in Jerusalem to get to the mountains, there's hills. You come from the north, the south, east, or west. To get to Jerusalem, you're going to go over hills. Sometimes more hills than others, and I'll read a little bit about that from Vernon McGee's commentary on that. But there's distractions, there's hills, there's mountains. So before we have worship, we have to have some perspective. Vernon McGee, good old teacher from the good old days, would be on the radio. I don't know if you guys heard him, but he has a really good passage explanation for this when he says, the theme is the pilgrims will see the hills of Judea come into view. So it's this being prepared for worship. He goes on to say, this psalm is the next song of degrees or songs of ascent as the pilgrims travel to Jerusalem to worship. Verse Verse 1, he says he changes it. Instead of saying, I will lift my eyes up to the hills from whence cometh my help. He says, I think it would be well to change this verse because it's obviously a question rather than a statement. Shall I lift my eyes unto the hill? He's basically asking a question, where does my help come from? The answer, my help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. So he knows his help comes from God, not from the hills. The hills were used either for military offensives, like you got people in the hills and they can shoot down, or not down, they would throw spears or whatever. Didn't have guns like that. But anyway, they would use it for positioning. So that would be man's strength. And also, he goes on to say, as a pilgrim draws near to Jerusalem, it makes no difference if he comes to the north, from the north, the east, or south, or west. Like I said, he will go through hills. Goes on to talk about how he's going through those hills. Goes on to say, as the pilgrim comes to the place where he can see the hills of Judea, he sees places of heathen worship. So think of the question. He's going towards the hills, and he sees other opportunities to trust. Because our humanity is built to be dependent on something. You and I are going to be helpless for the rest of our life. None of us are ever going to get good at this life and be able to put ourselves on those infomercials. I have figured out how to overcome the flesh and be able to make every decision without God, right? The question isn't, do you need help? Is, where does your help come from? That's the key question there. And so he sees these heathen places of worship, and he can stop right there and just be good. Horoscope or friends, human point of view. He can just do all that right there and be satisfied for a time. It's not going to be long lasting, but it will give him what he needs. So he sees those on the top of the hill, and he has to ask the question, is that where I get my help from? It doesn't come from the top of the hill. It comes from the Lord. And then Jeremiah says a great thing, Jeremiah 3:23. Truly in vain is salvation hoped from the hills and from the multitude of mountains. In other words, it's not coming from the world's human point of view, human viewpoint. Truly in the Lord our God is the salvation of Israel. This is the song of the pilgrim as he draws near, as he's on his way up. So that's what we need to remember. We're asking that question, where does my help come from? And I know we read the Bible and we just read it through really fast, but have you ever asked the question, how long did it take between those verses? So when he asked this question, where does my help come from, did he have to stop and think? This is the psalmist thinking. Or was it an immediate answer? How would you answer that question if you're pressed for a situation, if you're stressed? Do you answer it with, there's only really 3 places to get your help from. People, including yourself. Okay? A lot of people turn to themselves. What do you hear all the time? You can do it. Sam, what's your thing say on your
Shirt?
yeah, what does it say? I love me. I dare you. So just come on, motivate yourself, man. Let's get this, I'm going to hit this hill hard. Right? I mean, that's what we do. Self-improvement is huge. You can sell 1 million books if you say it the right way. The same thing they said 10 times before, but with a little twist. So say the same thing, but a different twist. Or it comes from things. I mean, we got a big house, and we've got projects, and we've got all this stuff, and we've got, my wife says, get the right tools, and we can do a lot more. We're getting ready to drive here, and there was this garage sale, and they had a table saw, and I was like, can I look at it? And she goes, will you build stuff for me? I'm like, of course I'll build stuff for you. Right? That's what we do. Things. That's where I get my help from. Or, we get it from God. Where does your help come from? It's coming from something because we are naturally helpless people. Right? We're born. No baby walks out of the womb. Hey, where do I go? I got my stuff. I mean, we're literally helpless from the day we're born. We just get more sophisticated at hiding it. And we become forgetful of how helpful we really are. Helpless we really are. So how would you answer that question? In order to answer that question, you have to ask the question, do you even see that you need help? Right? That's the first question, is do you see yourself as a needy person? oh, that's just going against the grain. I've got my own business. I'm retired with all I have all these. Okay, good. Thanks for sharing. Do you need help? 100% of the time? Yes. Only on certain days. According to scriptures, we need help all the time. So when you thought about that story I said in the beginning, when I was dealing with these big old giants, I would say my first question would be, where's my big brother? So I was in most of my life until I got saved, I was always dependent on other people to bail me out. But however you answer the question, just remember it's a setup question. Where cometh your help? From whence comes your help? Who are you going to rely on? God's trying to ask you just to think for a second. Sometimes we need to ask questions just to get out of our head and out of our routine, just to set ourselves up to go, there's an interaction here in my mind. You've heard that the Christian life is all about what you're thinking. Do you realize that 80% of Scripture is about what you're thinking? Set your mind on these things. Have this mindset in you. It's all about what you're thinking. But if you don't think about what you're thinking, then you just have another, thing you take off on your oh, I got that down too. It's about thinking. Well, have you actually chosen to think? So God is trying to get us to set us up. How are we going to think about these things? So again, let me just say our first point is needing help is not the secret sauce. Let's just imagine if you had an amazing recipe and I'm going, hey, let me have some of that. Oh, what's in this? That's a setup question, right? And I want to know more information. So that's not the secret sauce is not, needing help. The secret sauce is who you get your help from. You need help. All of us need help. But the question is, do we know who to get our help from? And as we read, we'll see that if we get our eyes above the hills, above the mountains, above the circumstances and the worldly philosophies to the Lord, there's some really good things that come. Some of the results of those things we'll see: faith rests, peace, joy, direction, stability, preservation, thankfulness. These kind of things are occurring when we look up past the hills to the Lord. So what's the key here? Again, like Romans 2, in light of God's mercies, in light of the fact you don't get what you deserve, you and I deserve what? Hell, right? So in light of that, we are getting all of this opportunity to worship. It's that humility, it's that seeing ourselves without God that helps us go to God. Weakness incarnate, as Pastor Roger says a lot of times. Do you and I even see that we're helpless? Look at, turn to 2 Corinthians 12. 2 Corinthians 12. Who wants to read verse 9 and 10 for us? 2 Corinthians 12, 9 and 10. And don't feel obligated to read. I've read these 100 times. So, but if you want to read out 9 and 10 for us, that'd be great. Okay, go for it.
2 Corinthians 12, 9 and 10?
Yep.
To another, faith by the same Spirit.
No.
You said 2 Corinthians?
Yeah. I'm like, wrong reference.
Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Glad it wasn't me.
2 Corinthians 12,
9. Yep.
And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in weakness.
All right, pause there. What is the condition for perfect strength? Perfecting strength. Perfect means mature. Unless it's talking about God's character, whenever you see the word perfect, just think mature or maturing. So what is God's condition for perfecting His strength in you? What's the condition there? It's made perfect or complete in what? Weakness. Go on and read the rest of the verse.
Therefore, most gladly, I will rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me.
Verse 10.
Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, in persecutions, in distresses, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong.
So again, do you know that you are weak? Are you glorying in your weakness? I'm not talking about this stuff we hear in the world where they're like, I'm broken, and they stop, right? They relish. I mean, I went online, you got guys like Simon Sinek, and you got Jordan Peterson. These guys are really cool. They say all this stuff, and they talk about the human condition, but they don't leave you with Jesus Christ. They just leave you with really clever ways of seeing that you're broken, and just hang in there. That's not good enough. We don't just need to know we're broken. What's 2 Corinthians 3, 5, and 6 say? Not that we are sufficient of ourselves, right? Weakness incarnate. What's the verse 6 say? But our sufficiency is of, somebody want to yell out? Of Christ. It's two sides to the corner. You know, the quarter, if I had a quarter, it'd be one side says your weakness incarnate. You can't do it. Flip it over, but your sufficiency of Christ. You got to have those two together. Otherwise, if you stick with one side, you will despair. I can't do anything. Oh, thanks, Sam. I can't do anything. I'm nothing. I'm just so weak. I'm just so, it's so hard. Life is so overwhelming. Yes, it is. Amen. You've got everything right. You've been set up for the second side. But my sufficiency is of Christ. But I understand that when I'm weak, he is strong. But when I'm weak, I am strong, he is strong. So unless you get that first part of it, I'm a needy, helpless sinner, you will not be able to enjoy lifting your eyes up. Why would you lift your eyes up if you don't have to do anything but look to yourself? You're going to always depend on whatever you're looking to. Someone said it this way. You want to know what you really truly trust? When trials come, it's the first thing you turn to. You want to know what you really trust? When trials come, it's the first thing you turn to. It makes sense, doesn't it? If it's people, nothing wrong with people. But our tendency is we start with ourselves and work back to God. Instead of starting with God and working through the situation, which may cause us to interact with people who may help us. There's nothing wrong with those. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 says, lean not on your own understanding. It doesn't say don't have understanding, but just don't lean on it. Our tendency, we're like, oh, I got this. Oh, wow. Dramatic. I've got this. And the reality is you don't. And that's okay. Are you okay with the fact that you're not okay? Can you relish in that? Can you relish in the fact that God sees you as weakness, as his child, and as the one that he wants to be the source for? So we've got to really get that in our brain. So I see some of you guys nodding in agreement, and I'm really glad to see that because it makes me think I'm not here by myself. Appreciate that. But do you know, and I'll say it this way, do you know there are times in your life when you don't know what you don't know that you don't know? You like that? Do you know there are times in your life when you don't know that you don't know that you don't know? There is information that's never been exposed to you. There is clarification that has not been revealed to you. There are things you don't get. And God, who is infinite in his wisdom, will set you up, put hills in your life to bring you to a place where you have to look up. Because he wants your attention to set you up to get what worship is all about. When you view God's mercies you offer, you get to not be you get to be transformed as you are conformed to the image of Christ. It started with worship. If I don't think I need to look up, I don't think I need worship, I'm not going to ever get to experience a transformation. I'm saved, but I'm stuck. And God didn't save you to be stuck. He saved you to renew your mind to conform to the image of Christ. But the tendency is we don't even know we don't need it. I'll give you an example. Who here has had Jack in the Box? Okay. Who is in here has never heard of Jack in the Box? Okay. Anyone here who has heard of Jack in the Box? Okay, this is an unusual situation. In St. Louis, we have Jack in the Boxes everywhere. I love their fried tacos. Now, if I go to Duluth and say who's had Jack in the Box, people are going to go, see, talking about that ding, 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 right? They don't even know what I'm talking about. That's my point. So if I say to them, oh my goodness, they got the best fried tacos, right? Every time we go through there, what do we always get? Fried tacos, 2 for $1 or 2 for $2. I don't know what it is. We're sitting there eating them, and then we get that little gut. Oh, it was so worth it. Oh, my stomach hurts, but it's so good. It's just this greasy thing. They got the lettuce in there, and everything's in there, and just bite on. The kids don't get messy. It's amazing. Somebody was really smart, right? But we don't even know that we don't know. So in other words, you may not know that there's a restaurant called Guadalupe that sells Chinese food, right? Like there's a Mexican guy who really loves Chinese food. You don't know that. So there are things you just don't know yet. And God, who is your helper, wants to bring you into that understanding. And I just had a men's group where we were talking about these things. I said, progress in the Christian life is a long process. Are you okay with that? Are you okay with the fact that God is in a long, put 1,200 zeros or O's on there, and He's okay with that if you will just relax. He wants to bring you along. And so our tendency is we don't like that. We want to help God out and tell Him we get it. So whether it's due to lack of understanding, lack of maturity, lack of willingness, hard-heartedness, there is something we need to get. When we do our breakout session, I'll tell you about this survey that was really interesting. So maybe you're not sure if this is you yet. Let's try to think this through for a second. Do you know that when we get to heaven, one of the activities that we'll do, and I'll list 3 of them, is learn about God for all eternity. When you get to heaven, you will continue to learn about the God of the universe and never exhaust the subject. Put your mind around that. How do you wrap your brain around that? No sin nature, and I'm still going to learn about the God of the universe? I thought I had to learn because I needed things. You need Him. You relate to Him. 3 things happen in heaven: singing, serving, and learning. We're going to be singing praises. We're going to be serving the Lord. We're going to be learning about who He is. And if you want the references, I'll give them to you later. So, question, do you think there might be something more for you and I to learn? Something in an area where you need to lift your eyes to the Lord. Okay? Just like the body functions and has certain things. Me and John were talking about this yesterday. He had a great illustration here. You know, the body functions even when there's certain parts of it that are hurt. And sometimes this hurt part becomes kind of in the background when I have another pain and I have to focus on another part. And so I'm like, my foot, and I forget about my bad shoulder, right? And then I deal with my foot, and then God says, let's go work back on the shoulder. So you're actually functioning at all times, but there's different amounts of understanding as you're growing in the Lord. And the reason why I say that is because it's all happening at once. Don't have this all or nothing mentality, like mature, perfect. Have this maturing, perfect, long process mentality. You're on your way up to the mountain. You're trying to learn what the things God has for you. And in the process, you're yielding to the Lord, and He's exchanging your viewpoint. I brought these 2 bags here just to kind of make an illustration. So when I was an unbeliever, my bag was full of human viewpoint. Situations would come along, and I'd say, to make that decision, and I'll just be transparent, to please people, I gotta pull out my Mickey Mouse book. This is supposed to be in. You can have that one. I pull out some kitty wisdom and I start working on it. I'm like, okay, all right, this girl needs a guy. Okay, act like you don't like her. She didn't notice, okay? So I was leaning on my own understanding to make decisions, okay? When I got saved, that backpack didn't go away, right? It's still there. I got a new backpack, Ephesians 1-3. I got all the riches of Christ. I got this new position. I got this new access. I got all these things. Now, every time I get an opportunity, Romans 12 is saying, don't be conformed any longer to your backpack. Not just external backpack, but internal. You have, even as a homeschool kid, crappy thinking. Sorry for the strong words, but you have improper thinking. And if you're not careful, you hear grace. It sounds so good, and you go, like this one guy, he heard pastor preach on legalism. Legalism's bad for you. And don't be a legalist. We're sitting back to drink coffee. He goes, I'm going to really try to work on not being a legalist. I'm like, did you hear the same message I heard? I think that was the point. You are a legalist. Stop. But that's where the renewal comes. So when God wants to renew your mind, He doesn't sit there and go, get rid of that backpack. You're never going to struggle again. You've got this one. He just works on it 1 or 2 things at a time. He goes, Chuck, man, what was that decision based on? You go, ooh. Doesn't match this backpack. In fact, I want you to turn to Psalms 139. Because I want to get you into this. We've done a little introspection here. We've talked about looking inside. Let's see what I think. This is not about self-improvement. This is not about introspection. Look at Psalms 139, verse 23 and 24. Who wants to read that for us? Psalms 139, 23 and 24. Yeah, let's read it for us.
Scripture, God, know my heart. Try me and know my anxieties. And see if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting.
So who does the searching? Jesus Christ. You don't need to be trying to figure it out. I had a friend come to me and he was struggling in his marriage, and he said, man, my wife brought these things to my attention. I'm going to try to figure out what else is wrong with me. I say, take that one from the Lord. That's the backpack reveal. And let's see what the Lord wants to unpack with that. In other words, focus on that. Don't go into this whole, I got to fix myself mentality. You're going to lose your mind trying to do it. There's a book written called Inside Out. Some people went in and never came out. Right? That's not the goal, is figuring yourself out. You're weakness incarnate. But God is in this slow process of revealing slowly who you're not, and who He is as you approach the hill. We are going to get through at least one verse in here. Obviously, it's great that we can do some more later. So now that we see the need, now that we see we need help, what kind of help does the Lord give? So you and I want to get help from the Lord, but what kind of help does the Lord offer? Typically, when we think of the word help, we define it as an assistant, as a helpmate. Maybe you got some dishes, you say, come help me wash the dishes, right? Versus, like a little kid. When Ian says to me, Dad, will you help me tie my shoes? What is Ian really saying?
Do it all.
Do it all. You guys know Patty Schmitz. She just got a job. She got a job as the kitchen help at an elementary school. Super excited. She's been thinking about going back to work full time. So she went to the job to meet the kitchen staff to see who she was going to be assisting. You know who she met? The lady that was leaving. Patty was hired as the kitchen help. She wasn't hired as an assistant. She was hired from the perspective of those who are in the school who cannot go in the kitchen to answer this question. If you need help in the kitchen, contact Patty. Now, the first definition we have is, I want to be an assistant. That's how we think of God. In the Greek, in the Hebrew, the word is a great word. Help is succor. It actually is like succor. And that's the sucker punch of God. He wants to do it. You want my help? Bam, get out of the way. I'll do it. I'll do it all. And so that's how God works. He does it all. He is our help in a time of need. He's not a helper. See, guess what? The second one has some of you in it, right? The first one says, like Ian, can you tie my shoes? The first one's like, the little kid, it's winter time. You say, hey, let's go outside. And he's out there getting his jacket on. And you know how it is. They're trying to get their jacket on. It's inside out. By the time it's done, it's all around their head. And you're like, you want some help? I got this. I got this. And they're looking at you with indifference. And you're like, well, wait, put your hand through. And then no, not your leg. And then they're looking at you with just like dissent. And all of a sudden they go, help! That's when they finally give up. And you know what? God's letting some of you, including me, get to this point where we go, help! Because we need to get out of the way. So I don't know where you're at. I don't know what God is doing in your life, but He is your helper. He is the one that wants to do everything. And we'll end with this verse before we do a little break and do a little Q&A about these verses. The psalmist says, verse 2, my help comes from the Lord. He didn't say my helper, my help. He says, The guy who does all the work, succor, is the Lord. And he says it is a wonderful word. It means assistance and support in time of hardship and distress. In other words, he is the one doing the work. And he gives us proof by making a statement of something God did without your help. Who made heaven and earth? Were you there? Doesn't that sound like Job? Were you there when I laid the heavens and earth? No. So guess what? You don't need to clock in. I got this. You can chill. But my situation, Lord, chill. Just keep walking up the mountain. Be prepared for worship. Worship is service. Worship is offering. So as a believer here today, that is what God is saying to you. Will you let me work on you? Will you lift your eyes in anticipation of worship? Lord, if I look at you, I will be transformed. I will be dynamically affected by your mercy. And as I'm yielding to you, I will be able to see the stability, the peace, the joy, the faith rest, because I realize that you're my helper. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this